Guyana is our country, our motherland, beautiful and free, and it's here for you and me. So let's come together, one for all, making her proud. Let's heed the call and sing this song out loud.
Throw away the grudge and leave it at the...
Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome some of our top performers as they tell us about school. We can learn from our children. Let's show them we can. Let's protect their future. Let's work for a united Guyana. A message from ERC promoting harmony and good relations.
The novel coronavirus 19 pandemic has affected the world and more so Guyana.
We, the frontline workers, continue each day to battle this virus.
But this is not a task for us alone. It is a national effort to save lives.
It is for your interests and ours to continue to adhere to all COVID-19 guidelines.
This virus does not discriminate. However, racial discrimination is a battle we continue to face.
Racism is present in our nation.
As we fight to eliminate this COVID-19 pandemic,
We call on all Guyanese of all races and creed to work towards eliminating racial prejudice.
We need it. Guyana needs it. Our future needs it.
Before the Supreme Presence, we stand to commend our prayer. In all sincerity, we ask the embrace of our humanity that stands before you in humility, to implore your divine guidance, which has endowed us with the faculties to explore, to understand, and with courage to commence change.
Supreme wisdom, from whose font inspiration has flowed into our imagination and sentient self, to grant us vision and the gift of free choice, be in our midst, guard and guide our cognizance, to rise above restless impulses. Let us be mentored by the spark of enlightenment you have endowed us with.
To embrace this conversation today among men and women from the variations of our young human species,
towards the wisdom and the common truth that we and our world so greatly require.
bless us with the inspiration of ideals of justice, truth, irrefutable principles, and understanding for an improved and mature nation, and for our better tomorrows.
I pledge myself to honor always
the flag of Guyana,
and to be loyal to my country, to be obedient to the laws of Guyana,
to love my fellow citizens,
and to dedicate my energies towards the happiness
and prosperity of Guyana.
UG Vice Chancellor Dr. Paloma Mohamed Martin, representatives of the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of Parliament, other distinguished guests logging on. Guyanese at home and abroad, good morning. I welcome you to the first of a series of critically important national conversations organized by the Ethnic Relations Commission. I must emphasize that this discourse on how we can improve ethnic relations is intended for the involvement and benefit of all Guyanese. There's more to come, and you are allowed to participate. Let's be civil and tolerant to each other. We have witnessed challenges and achievements in a multi-ethnic society. An event of this magnitude is intended to capture the views and contributions of all our peoples, of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds, for it to blossom and succeed. The ERC started out on that path. Invitations were sent out to all sides of the divide to promote and embrace the commencement of this dialogue. The entire nation needs to speak its diverse range of views for the sake of its own long-term progress. In this instance, we want to have frank and open discussions on factors that impede ethnic harmony. The views of all, and I repeat, all Guyanese, despite their cultural, religious, and political affiliations, do matter. We want to establish that. The presenters who have consented to participate reflect somewhat the diverse views the ERC is aiming for. This forum allows you, the virtual spectators, made up of Guyanese from all walks of life, to ventilate views and obtain answers on improving relations with each other, despite our different ethnicities. It is a hope that subsequent conversations will attract the interests of more Guyanese from the grassroots and upwards. More importantly, those views and contributions are to be submitted to the National Assembly and relevant stakeholders for implementation. That is the end result of the collective efforts of all. I want to extend thanks to the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator and the University of Guyana for their partnership with us. Various factors over time have contributed to the erosion of ethnic relations in our country. Along the way, the nation must gather to repair that erosion. All challenges and hurdles must be resolved when we meet at the table as one Guyanese nation. The ERC is our country. Our country is the ERC. My fellow Guyanese, I want you to contribute. That is my burning desire. In the words of Martin Carter, all are involved, all are consumed. On behalf of the entire Board of Commissioners, I extend best wishes to all Guyanese and to look forward to your continued participation. May God bless you all. Thank you.
I would like to commend the Ethnic Relations Commission for starting this extremely important conversation on improving ethnic relations in Guyana. The United Nations in Guyana is pleased to collaborate with the University of Guyana in supporting this ERC initiative, and I am honored to address this forum. The UN has been associated in efforts in Guyana to resolve the long-standing issues around ethnic relations for decades. Human rights missions have come to Guyana since 2004 and given many recommendations. The Universal Periodic Review and treaty bodies have reinforced or added recommendations. Countless dialogues have been supported to foster social cohesion, prevent electoral violence, and elaborate national strategies. This year's elections have served yet again as a major reflection point in Guyana's history of ethnic relations. It has also cast serious questions on governance, rule of law, and politics that tend to exclude, divide, oppose, and incite hate. It is a reflection point for the UN on the assessment of its past engagements in Guyana. Commemorating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the Secretary General launched a conversation with the world's youth on the future we want. Conversations took place in Guyana too, and young people of all ethnicities voiced their desire for equality and justice, dignity and respect, harmony with nature, and participation in decision-making. They called for dialogues to resolve differences and to foster mutual understanding and collaboration. All over the world where there is conflict, lasting solutions can only be achieved through patient dialogue, not violence. Dialogue needs to continue, but needs to be underpinned by appropriate values, standards, and objectives. Reflecting on the brutality and inhumanity of the multi-century history of how Guyana's ethnic diversity was formed, it is perfectly understandable that ethnic relations is still a challenge decades after independence. One can only imagine the longings and aspirations of Guyana's forefathers and foremothers reflected in the national motto. Making the motto a reality is a long and arduous path that only the Guyanese can achieve all together. Ethnic and race relations are a global issue. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has made the position of the United Nations on racism crystal clear when he said that this scourge violates the United Nations Charter and debases our core values, and affirmed that diversity is a richness, not a threat. In the aftermath of the killing earlier this year of George Floyd in the United States, and marches for racial justice and equality that filled the streets of cities and towns in the US and around the world, the Secretary General called for dismantling racist structures and for greater investments in social cohesion. We face the greatest test of global solidarity in generations as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to inflict unprecedented harm on people, societies, and economies around the world. We see that communities affected by structural racism and poverty are also among the hardest hit by COVID-19. The United Nations is calling for a transformative response and recovery based on unity and solidarity. Building back better means overturning discriminatory systems that perpetuate inequality and poverty and afford every person a life of dignity and respect. Simply put, the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved without inclusion, justice, and equality. Goal 16 says, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Goal 10 says, by 2030, empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other status. In past dialogues and public consultations, Guyanese people, young and old, have called on political leaders across the aisle to fix the problem of social cohesion and ethnic relations. As the role of politicians is important, as this year's elections showed, I hope that this national conversation facilitated by the Ethnic Relations Commission enables that much-needed dialogue between political parties for the common national interest. At the same time, all of us have to be aware and responsible for our own discriminatory and disrespectful attitudes and behaviors, and strive to promote constructive, respectful, and compassionate interactions in our immediate social environment. This national conversation should be about what each person can do to improve ethnic relations in Guyana. In the end, it is about building a society that is equal and respects human rights and the dignity of everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, I address Guyana and the diaspora on this important occasion of the Ethnic Relations Commission's first national conversation on race relations, which seeks to understand the challenges of ethnic harmony and to put forward recommendations to the National Assembly for consideration and thereafter implementation. A National Assembly, which I should say, that is allowed to have sittings, that must function. I know that a majority of us believe that ethnic harmony is achievable, and it's not elusive as some would have us to think. The genesis, therefore, of racial disharmony has emanated in some form from our colonial masters, and by extension, provided a significant part of the foundation of our Guyanese history. We should then commit to start a discussion, such as this one, on racial harmony by first looking at a system built on slavery and indentureship and the unequal opportunities thereby presented to our foreparents and handed down to us. I posit this position to indicate that the discussion on ethnic harmony has to give credence to other elements of our diversity. As we acknowledge that we are a multi-ethnic, multicultural society, and that the work of one of our partners in development, the United Nations, has provided much research and action points for the implementation over the years. In fact, there have been programmatic efforts over the past 2 decades aimed at addressing the challenges of such as ethnic harmony in Guyana. Most notably, the organization of peace-building initiatives under the multi-donor social cohesion program implemented by the United Nations Development Program from 2003 to 2006, and a similar program implemented by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. In addition to that, more recently, Guyana made a commitment under the 2030 Development Agenda, adopted by over 194 member countries of the United Nations General Assembly on the 25th of September 2015. It was titled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And in paragraph 8 of that declaration, it stated, and I quote, "We envisage a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination, of respect for race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, and of equal opportunity, permitting the full realization of human potential and contributing to shared prosperity." End of quote. The ERC today has taken a bold step in the right direction, whereby over the next 2 days there will be discussions and thereafter recommendations which will be made and taken to the National Assembly. And this is a good thing. However, as we prepare to start this discussion, let us reflect on some of the actions that the APNU-AFC coalition took during our time in government, since I believe that's a good starting point for me. We formulated and implemented certain programs so as to push the unity and harmony agenda forward. We believe that to achieve unity and harmony, a structured approach to building harmonious relations in Guyana is the foundation. And so the formation of the Department of Social Cohesion took place in May of 2015. The coalition partnered with the United Nations Development Program in developing a 5-year strategic plan which sought to promote inclusive growth and reduce socio-economic inequalities. It sought to foster integration, inclusion, and equitable benefits in developmental processes. It sought to promote social inclusion and acceptance of diversity. The plan included enhancing citizens and community safety and security, and promoting greater citizen participation in political processes and decision making. As part of that plan, the promotion of inclusionary democracy at the national, regional, and local levels, the strengthening of the role of the social partners in social and economic processes and promoting a culture of peace, reconciliation, harmony, and trust were all critical elements for implementation. As a matter of fact, in the process of actualizing these objectives, the staff and all the commissioners of the Ethnic Relations Commission were trained by the Department of Social Cohesion in the what was then famous Social Cohesion countrywide training titled Unity in Diversity, Inclusion and Education. Another major action that was completed in 2017 by the APNU ERC coalition was the Ethnic Relations Commission being reconstituted, because we understand the importance of the role and functions of the Commission to our society. And this particular matter, which some consider to be very sensitive, is of paramount importance to all of us. Maybe we are aware the APNU ERC government provided an enabling environment for the functioning of the ERC through the provision of human and financial resources. It is, however, disappointing for us as Guyanese to note that there were insensitive statements made by a current commissioner which recently served to fan the flames of ethnic disharmony. And we cannot tolerate that type of behavior. We cannot do that. Since we are striving for greater social cohesion in our society, our commissioners will have to be held to a higher standard of accountability. This is an absolute necessity. I know that Guyanese are a resilient people. However, dialogue and recommendations alone are not sufficient to improve their understanding of ethnic relations and enhance harmony. We have to model and manifest tolerance, acceptance, and inclusion at the highest level, inclusive, of course, of our hiring practices, consultation on policy formation, and we must also see as critical the need to incentivize inclusivity and tolerance, and to disincentivize ethnic division, intolerance, and discrimination. Promoting ethnic harmony and race relations is indeed a positive move, but let us not forget that without promoting economic equity and opportunities for all, enhancing citizen safety and security, promoting social inclusion and tolerance, and strengthening inclusive and participatory governance, without these things, there can be no positive outcome from a discussion such as this. I wish to add to this discussion that a holistic approach to strengthening cohesion in Guyana should be envisaged. And by that I mean that during the conversations on ethnic relations, we need to give effect to the desire on the part of the national stakeholders to pursue a coherent and structured process for promoting and enhancing social interactions in Guyana. And to put into perspective that in order for us to achieve harmonious relations and unity, we need to understand that ethnic relations is only one aspect of the equation that resolves the problem. So that arbitrary dismissal of over 1,000 Guyanese in 4 months is a bad start to any government. The example that we provide at the highest level, if we provide a bad example at that level, it will trickle down in an exponentially terrible way to the community levels. We as Guyanese acknowledge that race relations is intertwined in our cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity. and that over the years we have made great strides through the celebration of historic religious, cultural, and ethnic traditions and practices. At the national, regional, community levels, we have demonstrated this over the 5 years we were in government, whereby the signature event titled Harmony Village, in which the Ethnic Relations Commission participated and benefited, was a great example of how our Guyanese brothers and sisters can come together in a cohesive environment to celebrate each other's culture. It is from these actions that we promote respect and tolerance for each other. Differences, not just their ethnicity. Ethnic intolerance, and economic inequality are still strongly embedded in the structures of our society. And I therefore recommend urgent national action to address these untenable situations. Ladies and gentlemen, these are my thoughts, right? These are my thoughts on the matter, and I encourage you to engage very deeply in this conversation over the next 2 days. I thank you.
I am a Guyanese.
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 These are my brothers and sisters.
Guyana is our home.
We all belong to this land.
Let's respect and learn from each other.
And remove barriers that can divide us.
Let's all do our part
to build a unified Guyana.
There is strength in unity. Guyana, many cultures, one country.
Join the efforts of the ERC in promoting harmony and good relations across Guyana.
We've been asked to focus on how we can improve ethnic relations in Guyana. Well, to solve any problem, we must first recognize it. And this is by no means the first time that we are putting this matter on the table for national discussion. In fact, as long ago as 1994, that's some 26 years ago, Kamta Karan published a series on offerings on race and ethnic studies. And he asked me to contribute my views at that time. Sadly, what I wrote and said then remains relevant today. But you know, even before then, in 1963, the then Secretary of State for the Colonies for the British government, Duncan Sands, at the Constitutional Conference for Guyana's Independence, which was attended by the PPP, the PNC, and the United Force, had this to say, and I quote him: "All that you have told me at this conference and all that I saw in my visit to your country last July have convinced me that there is one problem which transcends all others, namely the growth of racism. That is the curse of British Guiana today. The whole life of the country is poisoned and weakened by mutual suspicion and fear between the two predominantly racial groups, the Indians and the Africans. Well, we've been an independent nation called Guyana for 54 years. And the question we must therefore ask ourselves is, have we, as yet, as a people, accepted who we are? And the fact that we share a common destiny. Have we, as a people, yet recognized that regardless of our ethnic heritage, we are first, foremost, and inescapably Guyanese? One people, as our national motto defines us.
Kit, I quite agree with him on his point that we have to start from the bottom. And we have to recognize that all of us are at that bottom. And we have to start from a position of introspection in how we are going to sow the seeds of racial harmony. If we are going to do that, we have to discard of all of our racist ideologies of advancing supremacy, of advancing exclusion, and start by embracing each other, start by embracing our neighbors, and ensuring that our neighbors or community or country or nation and the international community understand that we are not dominated by our history. Once again, we have to be honest about our history and how we present it. We have to be able to teach our history. When we start to do that, it becomes difficult to advance a political argument that would sow the seeds of what I'd say racial disharmony, racial and ethnic disharmony in Guyana. When we talk about trying to find a way forward, it is not going to happen if we cannot now hold those political leaders to account. Political leaders are not there to dominate Guyanese society. They're not there to rule over people, even though we would have seen attempts made at that. Political leaders have a responsibility to the nation to be inclusive and to ensure that they act responsibly, and they're there answering to the people.
We have developed some barriers to real improvement of ethnic and racial relations in Guyana. And one barrier is that we have sought to silence the saliency of race and ethnicity to our national community, our history, the manner in which we were brought here, the relations that developed around those, say and must say that race and ethnicity are fundamental to an understanding of who we are and to the building of our society. And we have not always acknowledged that. We have, secondly, substituted aspiration for reality. One people, one nation, one destiny is an aspiration. The reality is that we are in the process of becoming a nation. At the moment, we are a nation of nations. We have substituted civic identity for cultural identity. Another bad habit we have developed that has become a barrier to real serious discussion about race relations is that we have blamed ethnic conflict in Guyana on politicians. The politicians are the ones who have created the conflict, full stop. Let's get rid of them and the conflict will go. We've also developed the thesis of the guilty race. those who fan the flames of racism should be banished, put away, all kinds of things. And some of us who are ideologues have not helped. Marxist ideologues have talked about social reality in Guyana as though social class is the only category that matters. That gender doesn't matter and race and ethnicity don't matter. And some of our gender, our feminist ideologues have also contributed to this discourse as if race and class don't matter. And so when we put all of that together, we have a situation where we have not spoken frankly and honestly about race and ethnicity in Guyana.
In this national conversation on ethnic relations, we are asked to answer the question, how can we improve ethnic relations in Guyana? The word ethnic has to do with our origins and culture. It is commonly equated with race, but race is different from ethnicity. Race depends on physical characteristics, on which social behavior is imputed. And I do not believe that race is the issue in Guyana to a large extent. I think the ethnic question, again, which has to do with our cultural relations, is a much more fertile area of analysis. Because unlike race, your culture, your ethnicity is mutable. It can be changed. And in this, I believe this gives us hope in Guyana. Again, I say ethnicity is to a large extent mutable. We can change how we act. We can change our behavior. And we have changed our behavior. All of the tribes from Africa, whether they're Ewe from Ghana or the Ga from Nigeria, or whether we came from North India, or we came from Madeira or whatever, when we came to Guyana and in the intervening period, our culture has been changed. Our culture is automatically, the word, creolized. So to that extent, we have moved a great distance towards a common culture. There's no question about that, and I think we ought to acknowledge this. All groups have to acknowledge this, that we are not surviving in some pristine culture out of the old country. We have altered and we have changed.
The Chinese community, like every other ethnic group in Guyana, is nuanced. We have members who are descendants and whose families have been here long before independence. And in many cases, they no longer speak any Chinese. And the other end of the spectrum, of course, are those newer immigrants who have not yet learned to speak English, but who've had the courage and fortitude to go into strange communities and set up livelihood activities to feed themselves and their families. And it is this group that is often most affected by Guyanese xenophobia. In my opinion, we have but one race, and that is the human race. Yes, we have different ethnicities, but we all belong to one human race. And the most important thing each of us can do is to remember and be mindful of the fact that we have more in common than what differentiates us. The topic of today's discussion is what can we do to improve relations? And like any 12-step program, we must first admit we have a problem. And I think there's plenty of evidence that shows that we are not yet a post-racial society. We must also understand that racism is societal, it is institutional, it is cultural, and it is also an individual issue. And it happens to be part of the system that we have inhaled and are very much part of our everyday experience. The UN committee responsible for monitoring compliance with the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination of which Guyana is a signatory, has reminded governments to adopt national action plans against racial discrimination. And the plan should lay out specific approaches to combat racism and discrimination, from enhanced policing of hate crimes to public messaging and public and education programming, encouraging tolerance. The government needs to take urgent action to adopt new plans to make sure that this scourge does not continue as it has been.
Our historical journey through enslavement and indentureship and the purposeful mysteries of our historical narrative have provided a suitable platform for nurturing racism. We have to resist this because racism is a crime as much as it's a human frailty. Racism undermines all human rights. Racism has plagued Guyana because of an incorrect historical narrative that has been promoted and maintained by racial entrepreneurs. Are we a democratic society? Yes, I hope so. Or are we a democratic society with self-appointed guardians of democracy who are visible and opportunistic when it suits their needs? Are racism and democracy compatible with nation building? No. What do we really want to be Guyana? Improved race relations in Guyana will only result if 4 different estates in a liberal democratic society all provide leadership. These 4 estates are namely the government, and this includes the opposition, the private sector, civil society, and the media, which is called the 4th estate. All 4 of these groups have to provide leadership if we are to become a racially cohesive and a racially tolerant society. Let's speak about our government. A government's highest responsibility is to ensure the physical, economic, psychological, and spiritual well-being and security of its citizens. All its citizens, not just some. This responsibility is also enshrined and guaranteed under Guyana's constitution. It is well known that the winner-take-all Westminster system has miserably failed Guyana. It is an egregious, anti-human rights, anti-democracy system. It does not suit a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society such as ours. The Westminster winner-take-all model is suitable for homogeneous European societies, not for Guyana. It wouldn't work.
Now, the government's failure to collect data on the basis of race and ethnicity is borne out of the fact that both of the major parties in Guyana say they're national. And if you say that you're national and multiracial, you can't go collecting data, or let me say the incentive to collect data that contradicts your position is not there. Everybody will get up and say, I'm not an Indian party. The PPP will say that, and the PNC will say that they're not an African party, and other persons will say these things because they will say that their aspirations are national. But the fact that they fight tooth and nail to keep their ethnic enclave voting for them can only be contradicted by the collection of objective data that says, look, you may pretend to be a national party, but the reality is that most of your support comes from here. Most of the allocations of the benefits of your policies go to this particular group. And therefore, unless that information is available, we can't start to have this conversation.
I race you up the hill. Good. How can we get these bags up this hill? Let's empty it. Great idea!
Sometimes reaching a goal means having to leave some weight behind. Let's leave this baggage behind to reach our national goal of togetherness and free ourselves from prejudices so that our nation and all of us can reach new heights. Join the efforts of the Ethnic Relations Commission in promoting harmony and good relations across Guyana.
Together, we can go forward. Join the efforts of the ERC in promoting harmony and good relations across Guyana.
Importantly, it suggests that the ethnic problem in Guyana is not directly caused by wicked men, the ethnic configuration of the country, or even a combination of these, but essentially by the nature of these variables and the political framework in which they are located. From Mills's standpoint, Guyana and countries like it were doomed to political instability and poverty. And given what has happened to us over the last 2 generations, that conclusion might seem indeed correct. Guyana is where it is because it has been one of those countries whose leaders have not taken advantage of what is required to bring democratic governance to its category of countries. In a conducive environment, consensual and cooperative, in collaboration with other stakeholders, the ERC could have worked to understand the attitudes of the various ethnicity in their schools, homes, labor market, justice and health system, and suggest and make people ways for making people feel that equality really exists. It could have conducted, as David Hines tried to say yesterday, ethnic disparity audits and develop and suggest the implementation of measures to close the ethnic gap. But if, as the theory suggests and our own experience over the last 6 decades has demonstrated, pleading with politicians who control 80% of the population to do the right thing is a waste of time, what is the point of the ERC?
The ethnic disharmony in Guyana is manifested mainly in political disharmony, in ethno-political struggle for dominance between the 2 races. That is the main manifestation of ethnic disharmony. And unless there's a political solution involving the 2 main political parties, this ethnic disharmony in Guyana will continue. There are minor areas of disharmony, but they don't affect the core of the country. They don't affect the stability of the country. They don't affect the peace between the 2 races in Guyana. So the issue still remains with us of a political solution. Up to 1991-92, the People's Progressive Party had been calling for a winner-does-not-take-all system, or what is called shared governance. Sometime in around that time, in the early 90s, a group of PNC activists, mainly of the younger generation, but including Mr. Robert Corbin, people like Vincent Alexander, Sherwood Lowe, Aubrey Norton, McAllister, and several others of that group, had called for shared governance and had put out a political paper. So what we have today is the 2 main political parties at one time or the other were calling for a political solution based on shared governance, based on a political unity, a sharing of power between the 2 political parties. It has not happened yet. In my view, that is the only way by which we can resolve the major aspect of ethnic disharmony in Guyana.
So let's take Ms. Simpson's presentation now, and we will follow that with Ms. LaRose.
Guyana's roots are deeply and firmly planted in the painful history of the plantation economy, which is a part of that system. Political independence is but a thin veneer that attempts but fails to disguise the ugly reality of this plantation, where humans are stratified by wealth, power, ethnicity, divided by religion, and disrespected and discarded at the whim of the leadership or the plantocracy. Our social structure was and continues to be supported by a ubiquitous and seemingly inescapable narrative constructed by Europeans to create and maintain the ruling order. Through this finely woven narrative, the colonizers and their present-day successors determine how people were and are classified, whose histories and cultures were and are protected and enshrined, whose religions were and are acceptable and whose made illegal, whose ancestral lands and villages protected, and whose taxed, flooded, or seized. Creating a nation out of the plantation required uprooting the divisive system and narrative. It required an in-depth examination of that system, not just plantation as an economic system, but the social structures and the written and unwritten narrative deliberately erected to uphold it. All need to understand the foundations of our stratified society, why it was developed, what tools were used, were the tools of control and subjugation. Guyana today cannot hope to experience peace and prosperity on the foundations of a system of ethnic division, marginalization, and insecurity for profit making. The old system must be replaced by the new national narrative based on an ideology that uplifts and values all Guyanese, that enshrines equality, that tells the truth of our history, that empathizes with the pain of historic wrongs and prioritizes their rectification. Our national narrative must enshrine our determination to address and mitigate the enduring and complex legacy of chattel slavery, indentureship, and the destructive impact of the horrors of the plantation system.
The next panelist we will take now is Ms. LaRose, Jean LaRose, who is the Executive Director of the Amerindian People's Association.
All right, well, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. There definitely is a need to address politically, there is need to address economically, that came up. There is need to address culturally, legislatively, policy-wise. So many issues in relation to the hinterland, in relation to indigenous people, to ensure that across the board, the protections, and I'm not talking about protectionism as I earlier mentioned it, but safeguarding of people's rights, whether it's indigenous, whether it's another ethnic group, safeguarding of people's rights is very important. And another point I want to address is the question of one people, one nation, one destiny. And we're all one people, yes. And I have heard this, but within the one people that we have 6 peoples. You keep hearing that. And the need to recognize, the need to respect each of the individual people within their own cultures, their own histories. That is very important in understanding, respecting, and recognizing. And respecting and recognizing can be interchanged in terms of policy and legislation as well, when it comes to who we are as a people.
Rather than act impulsively, think about the consequences of our actions. Every relation begins from the home. With beautiful family relationship, it extends to the community and the country. Children should be taught to love each other. Husbands and wives should speak words that will bring peace and harmony, so that the children can emulate and take out in society. All of us must accept responsibility for happiness, progress, and prosperity in our personal lives, as well as that of our family, community, and country. In so doing, we must not be narrow-minded, selfish, or have unfriendly behavior towards others. Scriptures declare the whole world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. People with small minds divide the world into two parts, mine and yours, us and them. People with big, generous hearts consider the whole world to be one composite family. No one is a stranger to anyone. The Vedas carry the message of universal brotherhood in a very forceful and effective way. We all stand divided on the shallow grounds of region, creed, color, religion, ethnicity, etc. All such differences are, however, man-made.
The establishment of racial harmony in our beloved nation. Creating the road to one nation. Article 13 of our beloved nation's constitution states that, beginning of quote, the principal objective of the political system of the state is to establish an inclusionary democracy by providing increasing opportunities for the participation of citizens and their organizations in the management and decision-making processes of the state, with particular emphasis on those areas of decision-making that directly affect their well-being. End of quote. It is said that 95% of our Guyanese citizens believe in God. Hence, we have a head start to seeing ourselves as sons and daughters on the challenge, on the road to creating the road of one nation. This would be a road to fulfill the deepest desire in our hearts. That is to live in peace and in harmony. What a great day that would be when we start living for each other. Scripture requests of us to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, all our body, and all our soul. And then to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. By loving this way, becoming intoxicated with the power of love, we would have the purest and most beautiful appreciation of another's race. Consequently, we should not waste any more time. The time has come to promote constructive dialogue and cooperation, utilizing the best practices that we have seen and experienced so far on this planet.
I thought that Nigel Hughes' presentation was very good in the sense that he brought out the need, and he was actually pleading for this whole idea of having data and collecting data on the basis of ethnicity. Because, you know, many of our conversations are sometimes based on emotions and attitudes come to play, and then we get into a sort of a gaffe session. So I think to move us away from that, I will echo those sentiments that we do need to have a collection of data which can inform our discussion about race and ethnicity. Let me just jump, to come back to this whole notion of looking at facts and data. When we talk about this whole notion of an ethnic security dilemma, we are saying that there's always this fear that one group can control political power when they win the election. But when you look at the data, when you look at the information about the changes, changes in population, if you look at the African population from 1980 to 2012, it pretty much remained stable. There's a decline of 6%. But I will draw your attention to the Amerindian population from 1980 to 2012. That population had increased about 94%. So it is a growing population, as one of the speakers had pointed out this morning. And I'm very happy to see that the Amerindian population is becoming much more visible. When you look at the mixed population in Guyana, we talk about Guyana having many different races. You're looking at, from 1980, a population change, from 11.2% to almost 20%. So those two communities, the Amerindian community and the mixed community, are growing in number. And I think that is significant to the extent that Guyana is no longer a place where one community, one ethnic group, meaning Indians, who have traditionally been about, more than 50%. In 1980, that population was about 52%. 2012, it jumped to about 40%. Some people believe it may be lower than that. But there is a significant observation, when we talk about the population and when we compare that to the way people vote in Guyana's politics. So we can't make the argument, and I think this is where the notion of power sharing, which I had support previously, comes into play, because you don't have a single dominant group in Guyana that can win an election primarily based on ethnicity. I think the days for that have long gone. So we're seeing in 2015, we've seen an election where people like Rory Fraser and others have argued that, I believe they use the word floating votes, where in 2015, you have the coalition was able to win with some kind of floating votes. And then we've seen in 2020 a switch in those floating votes. So the argument that one group has dominance and that guarantees them their ethnic security by allowing them to win election is something that we need to move away from. And I think that myth continues today, but we have to look at the facts and look at the data, as we've said before. So let me just make my quick comments, and I want to get to that crucial question that the ERC is asking. I do believe that there are conditions in Guyana that allows us to kind of move towards a more inclusionary, representative, stable democracy. And I think some of those things include the fact that we do not have a single dominant ethnic group. We have multiple segments of the population. It's a small population. It doesn't complicate the situation for us. There is also external threat. If there's a conflict in a marriage, people seek an outside consultation. But if there's a threat that forces the country or countrymen and countrywomen to stick together, we do have that in places like Venezuela and so on. So that can also be a positive contributing effect to having more consensus politics. And of course, we do have a sort of a geographical concentration of population, which I think works well to sort of take power away from the center. So therefore, we don't have that intense competition of political power as to who is going to control parliament and so on. We can take some of that power and transfer that to local government. So to kind of summarize what I'm saying, and I'm going to skip this for now. I don't want to bore you, with the model. But I'm going to jump to, a couple of quick proposals, which I believe would be crucial. And I know some of these were discussed before, but by repeating them, I'm hoping to give legitimacy to them. As I've said, I believe a national dialogue is essential, and that dialogue must include our prominent politicians, because they are seen as the leaders of our community. Nigel did talk about this whole notion of an ethnic impact statement, and I believe this is crucial, very crucial, because if we jump to 2025 and we're having this discussion about ethnicity and who benefits, who controls what, and who benefited from state policy and so on, we can simply go back to the data. We can go back and look at those ethnic impact statements and say, look, this is what this community received and this is what this community received, and we can have an assessment of those policy. And I think that is crucial, and that is something we have been pushing for years. I do believe that you have to have institutions that reflect our population. I mean, there's a strong movement around the world today, where people are looking to be represented in institutions that make decisions about their lives. And I am saying, and I have not heard much discussion about, creating balance in the disciplinary forces, the civil service, and I think those are crucial elements of institutions of government that also has to be looked at.
And when one starts to speak about populating the army and populating the police in a particular way and the public service in a particular way, you also immediately impacting the opportunities available to a particular set of people who, in terms of their bread earning activity, are more inclined to be in those services and have a great opportunity to be there than in other places. So in fact, what you can probably be doing is creating a crisis for a certain set of people who have historically been involved in those services, and now you want to kind of dispossess them. So the holistic approach has to be critical, because if you're going to be balancing there, then you have to balance somewhere else so that they have equal opportunity to livelihood in the society. So I think that issue has to be looked at more roundedly than just simply how do we balance the army and the police, when in fact, if you do that, you create an employment imbalance in opportunities for a certain set of people. Federalism in our circumstance would have to be based on the existence pre the establishment of the unitary state of nations in relation to particular territory. And the only people in this country who we can relate to particular territory are the indigenous peoples. No other people can be so related. And I always make the point that in terms of the development of the stock in Guyana, we have a situation where we have all occupied the same place and built and contributed to the stock in that place. So now to try to give us dominion in specific geographical areas, none of us have a claim, like is the case in federal situations. So we don't have the antecedents for federalism. Suffice to say, if we were to be creating federal places, let's take Region 4, for example. What would we end up with? Or let's take Demerara. What would we end up with? Demerara is the place where you have the majority of people of African descent. And so the chances are that the Afro-Guyanese would dominate Demerara politically and otherwise. But at the same time, Demerara has the largest block of Indo-Guyanese, though they would be less than the number of African Guyanese in Demerara. So what you'll be doing is imposing on the Indo-Guyanese a federal state that is dominated by African Guyanese, where the Indo-Guyanese have the largest concentration of themselves. The second problem with the federalism in that regard is resources. You will be dividing up the country in a manner that you don't have equal access to resources. Because, for example, again, when you talk about Demerara, it is highly populated, but it is the smallest in terms of land space. and the least endowed except for its agricultural endowment. So we do not have the basis for federalism. We need to park that argument, but indeed, we can look at devolution in terms of our regions and in terms of our other local bodies as a way of trying to give more power and autonomy to the various groups. And in fact, we do have a lot of ethnic enclaves in our local system that devolution would appeal to.
I believe that it all starts with the home, because many persons have a tendency of, like, if their children want to marry somebody from another race, and when I do research, I realize that there are a lot of interracial marriages, and I'm saying that whether you're Christian, Hindu, Muslim, what have you, it will be hypocritical of you to tell your child that I don't want you to marry a black man because he's X, Y, and Z. And I'm saying it's going in contradiction against your religious beliefs. And my parents, I am grateful for my parents for teaching me. They said they do not have a problem with me marrying anybody from whatever race. They said that everybody have their own preference. What is most important is that the person must have character. Because as you guys are familiar with the famous comment or statement made by Martin Luther King, God bless his soul, that he said that we must not judge someone by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. So I'm saying that in order for us to move forward with this issue with racism in Guyana, it has to start from the home. It must be inculcated from the home.
The novel coronavirus 19 pandemic has affected the world, and more so Guyana.
We, the frontline workers, continue each day to battle this virus.
But this is not a task for us alone. It is a national effort to save lives.
It is for your interest and ours to continue to adhere to all COVID-19 guidelines.
This virus does not discriminate. However, racial discrimination is a battle we continue to face.
Racism is present in our nation.
As we fight to eliminate this COVID-19 pandemic,
we call on all Guyanese of all races and creed to work towards eliminating racial prejudice.
We need it. Guyana needs it. Our future needs it.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome some of our top performers as they tell us about school. We can learn from our children. Let's show them we can. Let's protect their future. Let's work for a united Guyana. A message from ERC, promoting harmony and good relations.
hotter. What a wonderful phrase.
It's proud of the beat and you know how we do, y'all.
दिल तो पागल है, दिल दीवाना है, पहली पहली बार मिलाता है यही, सीने में फिर आग लगाता है, धीरे धीरे प्यार सिखाता है यही, हंसाता है यही, यही रुलाता है। दिल तो पागल है, दिल दीवाना है। कजरा रे तेरे कारे कारे नैना,
वो शराबी क्या शराबी जो नशे में ना रहे।
ओ साकी साकी रे साकी साकी, आवाज आ रह न जाए कोई ख्वाहिश बाकी।
तुमसे मिलने के बाद
आजा उड़िए चल उड़िए,
आजा उड़िए उड़ बिखिए।
on the dance floor,
Guyana is our country, our motherland, beautiful and free, and it's here for you and me. So let's come together, one for all, making her proud. Let's heed the call and sing this song out loud.
Throw away the grudge and leave it at the gate. Throw away your prejudice, start a new slate. Throw away racism, intolerance and hate. Let's build a new Guyana from today. Open your hearts and open up your ears, open your eyes. Let harmony come in, open your windows and open up the doors. Open up for all of us to win. Open up, let harmony come in.
Let's work together and build it. Let's work together, it's where we live, in a land so great and free. Let's make it a better country. Let's work together for all to see. We can live in harmony.
Let's work, let's build, let's play, let's laugh together. We are multicultural, let's respect color, creed, and race. Let's embrace each other now and ensure each has a place in this melting pot we call our homeland. Open your hearts and open up your ears, open your eyes. Let harmony come in, open your windows and open up the doors. Open up for all of us to win. Open up, let harmony come in. Open your hearts and open